Okay, Andrea, you recently checked out Jotun, which is a game that I have not seen a lot of stuff from, but you got a code. The game is currently in its alpha state, I believe, and I'm curious how much of the game you got to check out.
So I first saw this game at PAX East. We talked about one of the 5 awesome indies that I played at PAX East just about a month and a half ago. And the section of the game that I played, as you mentioned, is the alpha, and it's one of 5 regions that are going to launch with the game when the game releases in September later this year. It has a full Steam release, so Windows, Mac, and Linux, and they will be having a beta sometime this summer. So hopefully there'll be a chance for people to get their hands on it before the release later this year. So this is the game from Thunder Lotus Games, and it really caught my eye because of its interesting hand-drawn, kind of Disney-esque animation style. It's a top-down exploration game that combines those elements with big set-piece boss fights, very similar to games like Shadow of the Colossus, which was something that we discussed earlier as well. I was really intrigued by the female protagonist. Her name is Thora. She died an inglorious death, and now she must prove herself to the gods in order to enter Valhalla. And so she does this by summoning Jotuns and then defeating them in combat. And it was really interesting when I saw it at PAX. I got just like a sliver of gameplay, and it was enough to grab my attention. So I was really excited when they came to me with some alpha code, and you guys can check out the gameplay here. So essentially what you need to do is explore these sections of the world to find these Isa ruins, and the ruins will then open the door to help summon the Jotun that you need to fight. So in this particular section, I saw 2 different areas. One called, I'm going to totally mispronounce this because it's a weird Norwegian word, Jormungandr's Lake. I don't know if I'm saying that right, Jormungandr's. And the other one is the 9 Rivers. And in each section there is one ruin, and you need to explore the world to find it. Also, there are 2 different gods that you can find their temples, and if you do so, they will grant you their blessing in the form of a god power, which is like a super move that you can use in the boss fight. So once you gather both of the ruins, you can go straight to the boss fight if you want. But I do not recommend that because it's really difficult to beat the boss without the god powers that you're given.
But of course, like in Dark Souls fashion, like someone just beat Bloodborne with a Guitar Hero guitar. So like, people out there are going to be like, screw any bonuses. I'm going to go straight for that boss fight and try to beat it. And it's cool that you can. They give you that option that if you want to make it super difficult on yourself, you can do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, I'm not saying that it's impossible. Obviously, the internet has shown us that people can do just about anything they set their minds to. But the whole purpose of the game, outside of the boss fights, is to explore these different areas. So the 2 areas that we got to see were pretty different. The lake was a wide open area. Most of it was just this giant sheet of ice. And quite frankly, was a little bit boring. I was a bit disappointed in the first area. I didn't really know where I was going. There's no mini-map. The HUD is very minimal, which I'm assuming is intentional. And I just kind of felt myself getting a little restless. I was just running around not doing anything. There weren't a lot of things to engage with. There was this large monster you had to avoid, but once you figured out his pattern, he was really easy to avoid, where he would come up out of the ice and try to attack you and bring your health down. Now, as you're exploring, you'll come across different areas of the world, including, a health revival pool where you can go and get a blessing, and it refills your health meter. And you can see the other sections of the world in the distance, which I thought was really neat. The other section of the game, or other region of this particular area, was called the 9 Rivers, and this one was far more interesting to me. So it had a mechanic where it was on a timer where a bunch of wind and a snowstorm would blow every 10 to 15 seconds. I think I counted at 10 seconds, so you had to find cover. So as you were traversing, you kind of had to keep in the back of your mind, well, if I get caught out in the storm, it'll drain my health bar down. That was kind of give it another little layer. But right now, I want to really give this game a hearty endorsement, but it feels like it's just missing a little bit. Does that make sense? Are you following me, Brandon?
Well, it's tough. I'm following you, Andrea. Well, it's tough I know we're in different places now, but I'm tuned in. I think it's difficult to pick a type of game, or to pick a specific portion of the game that best represents the entire experience. So I could see as developers them being really excited about, you're in Norway, you're up in the mountains, there's lots of snow, it's really isolated. So like maybe they like the idea of having a kind of like vacant area, and have you just kind of explore. Maybe that fits in naturally as far as the exploration progression of the game, but maybe just taken on its own, it's not really that exciting. So yeah, maybe what we're missing is the thread, to kind of see how all those things go together. I imagine even if you were to take Shadows of the Colossus out of context, some of those boss fights were fun, but were really cool as far as you see how they compare to all the different types of fights that you had. So how many Jotun did you actually take on?
Only one, the Winter Jotun, because they want to obviously save the rest of the boss fights for the full game, which is coming out later this year. So the area that I played was one of 5, which leads me to believe that there will be 5 Jotun total that you will play. And it seems that all of the different regions will be set in the overall world of Niflheim, which is from Norse mythology, and it's a very wintry, ice-covered world. So I imagine that most of the terrain that we see in this world, since it is heavily influenced and based on Norse mythology, will be, this kind of icy blizzard feel, which I'm okay with. I think the landscape, is a really interesting one. But I'm intrigued to see how much more difficult the Jotun are to fight later on. Clearly, this was entry level. It's alpha. It's just like a sneak peek at the game to come. But I also would like to see more of the god powers. So just so you know, during combat, there's a basic attack, and then there's a heavy attack and a dodge roll. So in the heavy attack, the swing with her axe on the heavy attack is pretty slow, but it's also very powerful, so it's very high risk, high reward. And Thor's god power that you get is when you activate it, it summons a giant hammer that when you do the heavy attack, it's a giant hammer instead of just your basic axe. And then the other god power that I got to play with was from Freya, who is a really interesting Norse goddess who has a lot of different things tied to her, but her ability gave you like super speed, so you could do your light attack really quickly over and over again, which helped for when you got the Jotun cornered in a specific area. It took me about 6 tries to finally learn all of the Jotun's moves and figure out exactly how to take him down, which I thought was pretty good, but it turns out maybe that's a lot. I don't know, maybe I spent way too much time learning, or I'm just not good at the game. But it looks really cool. I love the music in it. It's really well done. The sound effects are really good. Like as you're traversing through the world, like the crunch of the snow underneath her boots was just, it stood out to me. And the way that they use music to kind of indicate tone of what's going to happen in each area, I thought was extremely well done.
The game reminds me of the Banner Saga. The art seems kind of similar to that. Which is also Vikings and Norse mythology and stuff like that. Just kind of dabbles in it. So yeah, it's an interesting not only to see a recurrence of that style, but also reminds me of a lot of games we're seeing with really small protagonists. So it seems like the camera is kind of adaptive. So maybe when you're fighting Jotuns, it pulls back, and then when you're running around, it gets close. How close are you to the camera?
It did seem pretty far away for most of the exploration. There were a few key moments, like when you're picking up a god power, getting a blessing, or when you're picking up one of the runes, that it does zoom in. You're actually able to see Thora's features a little bit more. And then there are other sections where if you have an encounter with one of the monsters in the world, or if you come to a scenic lookout, that it pulls way back and you can see really large sections of the world. But for the most part, it feels pretty far away from the top-down perspective.
But I like this style, like Below and Titan Souls. We're getting a lot of games that have this isometric style that really, make your character just as big as it needs to be for you to register where the character is, and so you can really, like you were saying, appreciate these huge worlds. You love the vistas and exploring these worlds, and it's just a question of are there going to be enough worlds and enough things to explore and conquer for it to justify, the purchase of when it ends up being a full game. So we know it's coming out in September. Do we know how much it's going to cost?
I don't have a price for you on how much it's going to cost, but I would imagine it's going to be somewhere in the $10 to $20 range. Like $14.99 sounds like a nice price for
It felt
for
like a
this type of
$14.99 game.
Well, I mean, considering how much time I spent in the first area and knowing that I had the learning curve in the first section and that the subsequent areas I won't have to go through that, that initial hump of learning the mechanics of the game and learning how the game works and where to find certain things and how to read the maps. It seems to me like, that seems like $20 seems kind of like the max, you would charge for this kind of a game. Just because then after that $20 range, you're getting, closer to AAA territory. So, I mean, I would absolutely buy this game at $20. I would buy it at $10. I would probably buy it at $25. What I'm trying to tell you, Brandon, is that I have intentions to buy this game.
Well, I want to hear when you play the full thing. I want to do another Just Played when you finally get the game all to yourself at the end of the summer, and you get to kill all of the Jotun. Maybe there's a sixth Jotun where you just have a heart attack. You're like, I wasn't expecting that.
Secret Jotuns.
Secret Jotuns, unlockable Jotuns, DLC Jotuns.
Hey, you never know. It's the internet.
We got some time, so maybe we'll hear a little bit more about this around E3, but hopefully we'll hear a little bit more before the launch at the end of the summer, and hopefully you will check out the full game, and we'll get to hear more then.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Andrea.